Hi everybody and big welcome to a deck tech for Samut Vizier of Naktamun. I guess that's how you pronounce it. With a $500 price range, a budget version that is. The reason we're going budget is because this is overall like a decent okay commander. However, it's never really gonna be like top tier, the best you can do inside the competitive EDH format. Therefore, I think he fits perfectly at a lower power level and a perfect budget option commander at a lower power level, like something of a higher power commander of such. And I think you can make him really strong among the other $500 commanders that you can play. You can definitely upgrade him to a higher price range. We're gonna showcase some examples in the video as well. But for this video, we're just gonna focus on making him as good as humanly possible at the $500 range. So this is a 3 mana cost green, red, 1 generic, 2 free human warrior cleric, legendary creature, first strike, vigilance and haste. That's a lot of keywords. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, if that creature entered the battlefield this turn, draw a card. So when you actually cast this thing, because it has haste, it's going to generate a trigger on itself. But then it's not gonna do that for the rest of the game on itself. So you need haste tribal, or you need to produce creatures continuously throughout the game to draw cards. Now, how good is this actually? Large amount of card draw always equals to win. Any deck, regardless of color identity, let's just go colorless. If you just grab half your entire deck and put that into your hand, you win the game somehow. There are so many different fast mana options and so many different combo potentials, even in colorless, that just grabbing half of your entire deck will equal into a win of sorts. You could fearcraft any form of crazy win from that. So as long as this commander with its very low red-green color identity will acquire cards for us, we're gonna be able to win the game somehow. The first win con we're gonna put inside this deck is the Twin Flame Heat Shimmer and Dual Caster Mage. It's a rather expensive combo, but it's actually really efficient. It's more like a mid-range combo, and this is something of a mid-range deck going for a slower game plan of such, so this is a perfect finisher. There's just one big problem. Your commander is generating card draw from attacking. So if you draw into this combo and you go to your second main phase, you can't actually go for the combo. There's another really big problem, is that this ability is not an May ability. Just gonna point that one out there. You see, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, if that creature entered the battlefield this turn, draw a card. And the trick with Twin Flame, Dual Caster Mage and Heat Shimmer is that you cast one of the two Twin Flame Heat Shimmer on one of your creatures to create a token. But in response, you keep priority and you cast Dual Caster Mage on ETB. You're gonna target the Twin Flame or the Heat Shimmer, and that is going to resolve, create a token out of a Dual Caster Mage. The token of Dual Caster Mage is gonna target the Heat Shimmer Twin Flame again. So the original Twin Flame Heat Shimmer will never resolve. It will just sit there and just be on the stack forever until you have made infinite Dual Caster Mage. And then you go to combat. And then you lose the game because you deck yourself. I'm still having this combo inside this deck because eventually you will get your commander killed somehow. But another big reason why I'm actually having Twin Flame and Heat Shimmer inside this deck is because the tokens you generate from Twin Flame and Heat Shimmer, they have haste. And once again, we're on haste tribal here, guys, so they actually work great with the commander. Like, they're not bad. They're never gonna be dead cards in your hand, so to say, because as long as you have a commander, you could target something to get an ETB trigger from that creature, and then attack and get a card draw from that creature to get trigger from Samut as well. And once you just killed your Samut, you can go for the win. Now, it would actually be rather amazing if Samut just had a May on it, then you could go for this combo even with Samut in play. Still though, just keep that in mind. There is an Underworld Breach combo you can go for in mono red as well, where you use Grinding Station and things like Mox Amber or Mox Diamond and such, and Underworld Breach. However, Underworld Breach is rather expensive, and I did add a Collector Oof inside the deck. Collector Oof is rather cheap, not that expensive. So I did cut the Underworld Breach, but this is a combo that you could go for, so to say. It's basically just milling your entire deck until you assemble whatever combo you could think of, which would be basically this. Another combo we're going for in here is Goblin Recruiter. This is also a very cheap. It has a few cards that are pseudo expensive. Kiki and Goblin Recruiter have a cost to them, but it's not over the top. Also, this is a creature with haste. 1 red mana haste, and you can sacrifice it and another target creature gains haste until end of turn. So this is like a actual perfect card inside your deck. Normally Torch Courier is a dead card in most decks because it's just a 1 red mana 1/1 that gives something haste. But in the Conspicuous Snoop combo, it's actually key for the combo, but in this deck it's also synergizing with the commander. So the combo trick is that you have Conspicuous Snoop in play and Torch Courier, Kiki-Jiki and Mog Fanatic placed in this current order. You play Torch Courier from the top of your library, which is something Conspicuous Snoops allows you to do, and then you sacrifice Torch Courier to give Conspicuous Snoop haste. Then you activate Conspicuous Snoop's Kiki-Jiki ability, who is next on the top of your library, and make a copy of Conspicuous Snoop. Here you can make infinite Conspicuous Snoop copy, and the last Conspicuous Snoop token is going to target Goblin Recruiter to shuffle your entire deck and put Mog Fanatic on top of the deck instead. And from here, all the Conspicuous Snoops have the ability to sacrifice themselves to deal 1 damage. You have infinite damage as you have infinite Conspicuous Snoops. So in this deck, basically Goblin Recruiter is a 1-card combo. So we have a few Goblin Matron and Imperial Recruiter to tutor for that creature. I've also added Yisan, the Wandering Bard, that will find it on verse count 2. Worldly Tutor is a little bit expensive, but I did add that one to the list as well. So we have a few red combos, but we have one really big green combo, and that's the Natural Order into Greater Hoof Behemoth. Greater Hoof Behemoth is really expensive 8 mana. However, with a Natural Order, a little bit expensive, but it actually fits into the price range, 4 mana only. As an additional cost to cast this, sacrifice a green creature like your Mana Dork or your Commander, and then search your library for a green creature card, put it into the battlefield, then shuffle your library. The thing has haste, so that synergizes with the commander, but also it's gonna give all your creatures plus X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So from here you can have an overrun effect and win the game by just killing everyone in one big swing. Now there is a card I really want to talk about in the regards of the commander. So we have to continuously put haste creatures into play, but there is a better trick. We can have engines that are putting haste tokens into play instead, like Loyal Apprentice, Lieutenant. Also Loyal Apprentice actually has haste, so perfect here again. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you make, if you control your commander, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. The token gains haste. Perfect! So when this comes into play, that's 2 card draw, but for the rest of the game, whenever you go to combat, that's a card draw per turn. But also, the Loyal Apprentice is going to create the critical mass of creatures for your Greater Hoof to achieve a overrun effect as well. So the Natural Order Greater Hoof Behemoth with this commander, like the commander just naturally builds towards that finisher. So now I think you've gotten a pretty good idea of like how this deck is going to win, but also a little bit on how you should think when you're playing it. So a really key thing is that we need to have our commander early in the game as fast as humanly possible, like turn 2 consistently every single time. So therefore we're including all the crazy 1-drop green dorks to achieve that, like turn 1 dork, turn 2 commander. But we also have these green dorks as well, or these green enchantment dorks that is. Carpet of Flowers, Wild Growth, and Utopia Sprawl. However, I actually didn't include Carpet of Flowers in the list because it's actually a little bit expensive, so that's definitely a card you could include for the future. Now once we have our commander in play, on turn 2, you're gonna draw a card on turn 2. On turn 3, you need to put something into play that is continuously creating haste creatures of some sort. Or maybe you just found a way to win the game actually. That works too. But there's a lot of different cool creatures that can produce tokens continuously through the game, like Goblin Rebel Master. Now Loyal Apprentice is probably the best one you can have, but Rebel Master is pretty fine. It's also not that expensive, it's seen a lot of reprints, and it's kinda died in the power creep in Modern, so it's actually kinda good. But I haven't shown you the best one. Here is Urabrask's Forge. 3 red mana artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put an oil counter on Urabrask Forge, then create X 1/1 red Phyrexian horror creature token with trample and haste, where X is the number of oil counters Urabrask Forge. Sacrifice a token at the beginning of the next end step. So this will create a really big punching creature with trample. It's really hard to block. You don't get to keep it, but you don't really care because the tokens that you keep aren't going to trigger card draw for you. So this is something that's like growing in power continuously through the match. punching harder and harder, becoming harder and harder to block, but also starts like threatening damage eventually. Sooner or later this will be able to like punch people out of the game. This actually means that we should start to talk about if we should include Rite of the Raging Storm, a 5 expensive mana red enchantment. Creatures named Lightning Rage can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player creates a 5/1 red elemental creature token named Lightning Rager. It has trample, haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this creature. So this is going to trigger card draw for you on your turn, as this thing has trample and haste. Perfect. Very hard to block this thing. But it will sit there and punch players quite efficiently throughout the match. Like your opponents are getting these 5/1s that also attack your other opponents. In general, it's a little bit too expensive. I'm not actually including it inside my list, but depending on how you want your deck to flow, like maybe you don't really want to go for the combo. Maybe you just want to go for the combat damage potential instead and include things like this. Like this is giving you a card draw and it's also like punching your opponents really hard. So it's not completely stupid to have this inside your deck. It actually is kind of fine. Kind of depends on how you want to flow. Just want to bear in mind that it is a bit expensive, so yeah. Considering the budget and considering that players in general aren't really capable of dealing with a lot of 5/1s attacking, that's definitely very scary. However, people with Skull Clamp will love this thing, so there are some drawbacks with this thing too. Speaking of Skull Clamp, we're including Skull Clamp inside this deck as well. As you might have noticed, we're producing a lot of tokens on toughness 1, so Skull Clamp feels like a perfect thing here. It's also not that expensive. It's been reprinted quite a lot. Like our loyal apprentice is already creating a lot of 1/1s, and once those 1/1s have done their thing, we can Skull Clamp them and draw cards. But now we need to talk about a really important thing inside this game: interaction. Being able to stop and prevent your opponents from winning the game before you do. So we've already mentioned Collector Oof, but we do have some other really cool red control cards like T-Belt's Trickery, Red Elemental Blast, Pyroblast. We have things like Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon. However, I don't think Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon are that good in cEDH, and also not in budget cEDH, because most decks usually play a lot of basic lands. Not always. There are like situations where people are trying to make Tainted Pact into a possible thing in the budget version. Now, Tainted Pact is not kind of actually a bit expensive, actually grown in price, but when you're making a Tainted Pact deck, you're including a lot of non-basic lands. That means that your Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon will hit them really good. But a big problem is that a lot of decks are on the color identity of red, so you're not really hurting them that much. Back in the days, people were playing a lot of Thrasios and Tymna, not on red, so they suffered really heavily from Blood Moons and Magus of the Moon effects. But today they're not that good, but I want to showcase them anyways because they are cards you could include inside your deck depending on the metagame of sorts. However, T-Belt's Trickery, Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast, they are great. Now if you want to take a look card by card exactly how I put this deck together, by the way, we're including this one. I kind of want to have Final of Devastation inside this deck, but this one is a lot cheaper. Final of Devastation did not make the cut because it's a little bit expensive. Anger gives everything haste. Fauna Shaman, great tutor for creatures. This is a very creature focused deck. Now with Fauna Shaman, Anger, Felon of the Third Path and Greater Hoof Behemoth, you can actually use Fauna Shaman to tutor out Anger, discard Anger, eventually discard a Greater Hoof Behemoth, then use Fauna Shaman to find Feldon, play Feldon because of Anger, Feldon has haste, and boom, you have a Greater Hoof Behemoth trigger. Feldon of the Third Path is a form of combo, also a combo rebuilder. Like he can find key creature cards from a graveyard and put them directly into play, but also he functions pretty good with your commander. He's also pretty cheap because he's like a commander product that doesn't see much play elsewhere, so he's very cheap. He's definitely on a budget, but he creates haste tokens. That's great with your commander. Card draw right there and there. Fierce Empath to find the very expensive Greater Hoof Behemoth, but also we can't play Gruul without Rurik Tar, so we can use Fierce Empath to also find Rurik Tar. I also have Galia of the Endless Dance inside this deck. She's 2 CMC, 2/2 haste creatures. Now if you attack with 3 or more creatures with this deck, is gonna do a lot. You're gonna generate more triggers from her too, to draw more cards, accidentally discard cards at random, so she's a little bit risky, but she's fine. Neheb Dreadhorde Champion is a creature that doesn't really synergize that much inside this deck. It's definitely a card you could cut. I play it because I love it. I really like the mana it produces, but also the card draw capability it has too. Or not the card draw, but the card filtering of such. Wandering Archaic is an amazing hate bear. Play that one. It's great. It's gonna make all counter spells cost more. And if someone is casting like a tutor, that's a lot of value for you. Professional Facebreaker doesn't really synergize with this deck in general at all. It doesn't have haste, but I do like the part where it's creating treasures, and you can sacrifice treasures to gain value. So it's like a card draw value engine outside of the commander. Kogla Titan Ape, I really like that one. It's a very expensive interaction, but it's doing a good job of what it wants to do. Fight creatures and destroy artifacts and enchantments. Toski, this is a deck that's producing a lot of tokens. We've already mentioned Loyal Apprentice a lot and variations to Loyal Apprentice. So Toski is going to benefit a lot, or really love the fact that you're putting a lot of creatures and tokens into play that can hit face. The same thing with Oran Frostfang. You could say that this commander is a smaller version to Oran Frostfang and Toski. Now you could ask, why not play Toski instead? The big reason is this is coming into play on turn 2. This is coming into play a little bit slower. Also, this is mono green. Here we're gaining red, and when we're gaining red, we're getting all cool red combos. Like we also have Kiki-Jiki and Hyrax Tower Scout inside the deck. That's a 2-card combo that you can find with something like a Fauna Shaman. But also with a 1-card combo, Shared Summons instant speed. So you cast this in an opponent's end step and you find your Kiki-Jiki, if I can, there it is, Kiki-Jiki, and your Hyrax Tower Scout, all in 1 card. Code of Calling is a little bit expensive, but once again, we're producing a lot of tokens, so we should be able to like pay for it eventually down the line. Dampening Sphere, really key, really good at anti-storm, also really cheap. Blade of Selves, this is creating a lot of tokens. So you equip this to one of your creatures, like let's go, what should we do it on? We could go to Goblin Matron. That sounds weird. No, actually, let's go on Imperial Recruiter instead. So you attack with your Imperial Recruiter 1/1 at someone that doesn't actually have blockers. Now, because of Blade of Selves, you're going to generate 2 more tokens, which means 2 more search effects. So you're going to find 2 more creatures. That's a lot of good value. But these haste tokens will also generate triggers with your commander as well. Lightning Greaves is actually a little bit expensive, but this is a deck that is really focused on haste. And there's a lot of creature here that doesn't actually have haste. Like Fierce Empath is a good creature tutor on a budget that doesn't have haste. But with Lightning Greaves, it can become a card draw effect. Rhythm of the Wild is also giving you mass haste. It's actually a card that sees plays inside some cEDH decks sometimes because it's protecting your creatures from being counterspelled, and this is a creature-orientated combo deck, so it's actually quite good. It also synergizes with the commander, so it's perfect. Like it's good on its own, and it's synergized with its commander. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to have. And I did go with a 30 land count, mostly basics, forest and mountain, to reduce the cost of this deck. And as you can see, it's pretty much below $500. In the future though, because of inflation, it's probably gonna go up. So if you watch this video like further down the line, a year later, it's probably gonna be higher compared to what it is now, as cards usually go up in price over time. This land is actually not that expensive, and it creates 2 1/1 creatures that gain haste. Kinda like that. That's perfect. That's like 2 card draws. So you can cycle this land to draw 2 cards. I also included Mosswort Bridge because once again, this is a deck that is producing a lot of creatures in general and eventually climbing to the 10 power to cast whatever you have hidden inside this for free. That's the deck. Once again, not the strongest thing in the world you could do, but actually quite fine. Like it's a gruul card draw commander on a really low mana cost, and that's good. You get your commander to play early in the game, start drawing cards, accumulate value, and eventually figure out a way to win the game in some form of way. Like this is also a deck that could win with combat damage. Like I've mentioned before, we're producing a lot of tokens, and if the game just is interacted well enough, we can punch people out of the game. Sometimes that happens. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. I have plans to do more of these budget deck text videos. I've done a lot of them in the past, but it's time to showcase a lot of other commanders that could be built on a really low budget and function pretty well in a higher power level. This is a cEDH focused channel on the best of the best things you can do inside competitive Commander, but we also showcase some of the lower power things as well from time to time. Take care guys, and we'll see you in the next video.